Laura Bennett was a woman who had learned early in life that things don't always go as planned. She lived in a small coastal town in Virginia, where the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was home, a place where she raised her son Ethan on her own. Life wasn't easy for Laura, but she never let anyone see her struggle. To the world, she was strong, dependable, and full of determination. And, to Ethan, she was simply mom. The best mom he could ever ask for. Laura had joined the Marine Corps when she was younger, driven by a desire to serve her country and provide a better future for herself and her family. Over the years, she worked hard, earning respect from her fellow Marines and superiors alike. But being a Marine wasn't just about wearing the uniform or following orders. It was about sacrifice. Laura knew this better than most. Weekends spent away from Ethan, holidays missed because of duty, birthdays celebrated over phone calls instead of hugs. These were the sacrifices she made without complaint. Yet no matter how tough things got, Laura always reminded herself why she did what she did. Her son was her reason, and seeing him grow into a kind, intelligent young man made every hardship worth it. This year was different, though. This year, Ethan was graduating high school. He wasn't just any graduate, he was one of the top students in his class. His teachers often praised him for his dedication and leadership skills, qualities Laura believed came from years of watching her balance work and family. For months, Ethan had been talking about graduation day, imagining how proud his mom would feel sitting in the audience. He even joked that if she cried during the ceremony, he'd tease her about it later. Laura laughed at his jokes, but deep down, she knew there was truth in them. She probably would cry. It was impossible not to when thinking about how far they'd come together. The invitation arrived in the mail one sunny afternoon. It was simple, printed on thick cardstock with elegant lettering. You are cordially invited to attend Ethan Bennett's high school graduation ceremony. Laura held the envelope in her hands, staring at the words as if they might disappear if she looked away. A wave of emotion washed over her, pride, joy, and maybe even a little sadness, knowing this marked the end of an era. Still, she couldn't wait for the big day. Weeks before the ceremony, Laura submitted a formal request for leave from her commanding officer. She explained the importance of the event and assured them she would return to duty immediately afterward. Her request was approved without hesitation. Captain Ryan Mitchell, her superior, understood how much this meant to her. "Take your time, Corporal," he said with a warm smile. "You've earned it." On the morning of the graduation, Laura woke up early. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting soft golden hues across the sky. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her Marine uniform until it fit perfectly. The medals pinned to her chest gleamed in the light, each one representing years of service and sacrifice. As she gazed at her reflection, Laura felt a mix of emotions. Pride, yes, but also nervousness. What if something went wrong? What if she somehow missed this moment after all the planning? Shaking off the thought, Laura grabbed her hat and headed out the door. Ethan was already waiting outside, dressed in his cap and gown. He gave her a quick hug before climbing into a friend's car to head to the school. Laura drove separately, her mind racing with thoughts of the ceremony ahead. When she arrived at the auditorium, she parked her car and took a deep breath. The building buzzed with excitement as families gathered, chatting and snapping photos of their graduates. Laura spotted several familiar faces from the neighborhood and exchanged polite greetings as she made her way inside. She found her assigned seat near the middle of the room and settled in, clutching her program tightly. Everything seemed perfect so far. The stage was decorated with blue and white banners and rows of chairs filled the space. Students lined up backstage, peeking out nervously at the crowd. Laura scanned the room, searching for Ethan among the sea of caps and gowns. When she finally spotted him standing tall and confident, her heart swelled with pride. But then, something unexpected happened. 2 security guards approached her, their expressions unreadable. One of them cleared his throat and gestured toward her uniform. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we need to ask you to leave," he said firmly. Laura blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "We've received instructions that only civilians are allowed inside today," the other guard added. "Uniforms aren't permitted unless specifically authorized." Laura frowned, confusion mixing with frustration. "I'm here for my son's graduation," she explained. "I requested leave weeks ago, and my commanding officer approved it. I didn't think this would be an issue." The guards exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable, but unwilling to budge. "We're just following protocol, ma'am," one of them said apologetically. "If you stay, we'll have to report it." For a moment, Laura considered arguing further. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tell them exactly what she thought of their so-called protocol. But she stopped, herself. Making a scene wouldn't help anyone, least of all Ethan. Taking a deep breath, Laura nodded stiffly and stood up. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the auditorium, her heart heavy with disappointment. Outside, the air felt cooler than it had earlier. Laura leaned against the wall of the building, trying to process what had just happened. How could this be real? After everything she'd done, after all the sacrifices she'd made, she wasn't allowed to watch her own son graduate. Tears pricked at the corners Zhao Qi. Laura stood outside the auditorium, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The cool breeze brushed against her face, but it did little to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could this be happening? After all the years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication, not just to her country but to her son, she was being told she couldn't attend one of the most important moments of Ethan's life. It didn't feel fair. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone. She needed to talk to someone, anyone who might understand. Scrolling through her contacts, she found the number for Captain Ryan Mitchell, her commanding officer. He had always been supportive, treating her with respect while pushing her to excel. If anyone could help her figure out what to do next, it was him. When he answered, his voice was calm and steady. "Corporal Bennett, is everything all right?" Laura hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain the situation without sounding too emotional. Finally, she spoke. "Sir, I'm at my son's graduation ceremony, but they're not letting me stay because of my uniform. They said only civilians are allowed unless there's special permission." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, betraying the frustration she'd been holding back. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Captain Mitchell replied, his tone firm but reassuring. "Stay right where you are, Corporal. Let me see what I can do." Relief washed over Laura, though it was short-lived. She hung up and leaned against the wall again, watching families file into the building. Parents hugged their children, snapping photos and laughing together. Laura's heart ached as she imagined herself doing the same with Ethan. If only she were allowed inside. She clenched her fists, trying to push away the feelings of helplessness. All she could do now was wait. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Just as Laura began to wonder if anything would change, she noticed movement near the entrance. A group of men approached, their presence immediately drawing attention. They wore navy blue uniforms adorned with trident pins, the unmistakable insignia of Navy SEALs. 12 of them walked in perfect formation, led by a man whose confident stride seemed to command respect from everyone around him. Laura recognized him instantly. Commander Jake Owens. Years ago, they had served together during a joint operation overseas. Though their paths hadn't crossed since then, Laura remembered him well. He was known for his leadership, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Seeing him now, standing tall and composed, filled her with a strange mix of hope and confusion. Jake spotted Laura almost immediately. His sharp eyes scanned the area before landing on her, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He broke away from the group and strode toward her, his expression serious but kind. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "Corporal Bennett," he said, his voice warm yet authoritative. "It's been a long time." Laura shook his hand, still unsure why he was here. "Commander Owens, what are you doing here?" Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced back at the SEALs who had taken positions near the entrance, their postures relaxed but alert. Then he turned his attention back to Laura. "We heard about what happened," he said simply, "and we decided you shouldn't have to face this alone." Laura blinked, caught off guard by his words. "You heard about it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded. "Captain Mitchell called us. He thought we might be able to help." Before Laura could respond, Jake gestured toward the doors of the auditorium. "Let's go inside," he said firmly. "This isn't over yet." The two guards who had escorted Laura out earlier were still stationed near the entrance. When they saw the SEALs approaching, their expressions shifted from casual indifference to visible unease. One of them stepped forward nervously, clearing his throat. Gentlemen, may I assist you with something?" Jake stopped a few feet away, his posture relaxed but commanding. "Yes," he said calmly. "We're here to ensure Corporal Bennett is allowed to attend her son's graduation." The first guard hesitated, glancing at his partner for support. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we've been instructed that only civilians are permitted inside today. We're just following orders." Jake raised an eyebrow, his gaze piercing. "Orders?" he repeated. "Do you know who this woman is?" The second guard frowned, clearly uncomfortable under Jake's scrutiny. "Ma'am, no disrespect intended, but your uniform—" "My uniform," Jake interrupted, his voice rising slightly but remaining controlled, "represents decades of sacrifice, courage, and service to this nation. This Marine standing beside me has given up holidays, birthdays, and countless personal moments so people like you can live safely in places like this. And now you're telling me she doesn't deserve to watch her own son graduate?" The room grew eerily quiet. Families and staff members nearby turned to watch the exchange, their curiosity piqued. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply stared, captivated by the unfolding scene. The guards fidgeted, clearly unsure how to respond. Jake pressed on, his tone unyielding. "If anyone deserves to be here today, it's Corporal Bennett. So tell me, are you really going to stand in her way?" One of the guards opened his mouth to argue but quickly closed it again. Neither of them seemed willing to challenge Jake or the SEALs behind him. Finally, after a tense moment of silence, the first guard stepped aside. "Very well, sir," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "She may enter." A wave of relief washed over Laura, though it was quickly replaced by gratitude. She looked at Jake, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake gave her a small smile. "No thanks necessary," he said. "Now let's get you to your seat." With the SEALs leading the way, Laura followed them into the auditorium. As they walked down the aisle, heads turned and whispers rippled through the crowd. People stared in awe at the sight of 12 Navy SEALs escorting a lone Marine to her place. Someone in the audience shouted, "Let her in." Others joined, in clapping and cheering until the entire hall erupted in support of Laura. For the first time that day, Laura felt truly seen, not just as a Marine, but as a mother whose love and sacrifices had shaped her son into the remarkable young man he'd become. As Laura walked down the aisle of the auditorium, escorted by 12 Navy SEALs, she felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite put into words. Pride, gratitude, and even a little embarrassment swirled inside her. The clapping and cheering from the crowd were overwhelming. Parents, teachers, and students turned in their seats to watch the scene unfold, many of them smiling or nodding in approval. Some wiped away tears, moved by the display of solidarity and respect. The two guards who had tried to stop Laura earlier stood frozen near the entrance, their faces red with shame. They didn't dare say another word as the SEALs passed by, their presence commanding silence and reverence. Laura kept her head high, though her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this, especially not in such a public way. But she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. The SEALs had her back, and that gave her strength. When they reached Laura's original seat, Commander Jake Owens turned to her with a small smile. "Take your place," he said softly. "You belong here." Laura nodded, her throat too tight to speak. As she sat down, the SEALs did something unexpected. They stood in unison, forming a line behind her. Each man saluted her with precision, their movements synchronized and sharp. The gesture was simple but powerful, a silent show of respect for everything Laura had done as a Marine and as a mother. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away, trying to stay composed. The audience erupted into applause again, louder this time. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as if they were watching a hero walk onto the stage. Laura glanced around, feeling both humbled and overwhelmed. She hadn't expected any of this when she woke up that morning. All she wanted was to see Ethan graduate, to be there for him like any mother would. Now, thanks to the SEALs, she was getting more than she ever imagined. Ethan, seated among the graduating class, noticed the commotion and turned his head. At first, he didn't understand what was happening. Then he saw his mom sitting in the front row surrounded by men in navy blue uniforms. His eyes widened in surprise and a grin spread across his face. He recognized Commander Owens immediately. His mom had told him stories about serving alongside the SEALs during her career. For a moment, Ethan forgot where he was. He wanted to jump out of his seat and run to her, but he stayed put, knowing he had to wait until the ceremony began. The principal of the school stepped up to the microphone, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice shaky but sincere, "it seems we have some very special guests joining us today. On behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank these brave individuals for reminding us of the true meaning of honor and sacrifice." More applause followed, and the energy in the room shifted. What had started as a routine graduation ceremony had transformed into something extraordinary. Parents hugged their children tighter, teachers exchanged proud smiles, and graduates sat a little straighter in their seats. Even the guards who had caused the problem earlier seemed to soften, their expressions filled with regret and admiration. Finally, the ceremony began. Names were called one by one, each graduate walking across the stage to receive their diploma. Laura watched intently, her heart pounding as she waited for Ethan's name to be announced. When it finally came, she felt a rush of pride so strong it nearly took her breath away. "Ethan Bennett," the principal called out, his voice echoing through the auditorium. Ethan stood up, adjusting his cap before stepping onto the stage. The crowd cheered, but the loudest applause came from Laura and the SEALs. Ethan walked confidently, his eyes scanning the audience until he found his mom. Their gazes locked, and for a brief moment, it was as if no one else existed in the room. Ethan smiled, mouthing the words, "Thank you, Mom," before accepting his diploma. Laura pressed a hand to her chest, fighting back tears. This was the moment she had dreamed of for years, the moment that made all the sacrifices worth it. Seeing Ethan standing on that stage holding his diploma filled her with a sense of accomplishment she couldn't describe. It wasn't just his success, it was theirs. Together, they had overcome every challenge life threw at them, and now they were celebrating the fruits of their hard work. After receiving his diploma, Ethan paused for a second, looking directly at the SEALs. He raised his hand in a crisp salute, a gesture that surprised everyone in the room. The SEALs returned the salute, their expressions solemn but proud. It was a touching moment, one that brought fresh waves of applause from the audience. When Ethan returned to his seat, the ceremony continued, but the mood remained electric. People whispered excitedly about what had happened, sharing stories and speculating about the SEALs' involvement. Some parents approached Laura during breaks, thanking her for her service and expressing admiration for how gracefully she handled the situation. Others simply offered kind words or patted her shoulder in support. By the end of the event, Laura felt like she had gained not only a deeper connection with her son, but also a renewed sense of belonging within her community. As the final notes of the school song played and the graduates tossed their caps into the air, Laura allowed herself to relax. The weight that had been pressing on her shoulders all day lifted, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She glanced at Commander Owens, who gave her a reassuring nod. Though she hadn't asked for their help, The SEALs had shown up, in a way that changed everything. They reminded her, and everyone else in that room, that kindness, respect, and unity could turn even the toughest situations into something beautiful. Outside the auditorium, families gathered to take photos and congratulate the graduates. Ethan found Laura almost immediately, pulling her into a tight hug. "I can't believe you brought the SEALs," he said, laughing. "This is insane," Laura chuckled, ruffling his hair. And for the first time that day, she allowed herself to fully enjoy the moment. After the ceremony ended, the excitement in the auditorium didn't die down. Families spilled out into the hallway and parking lot, buzzing with energy as they congratulated graduates and snapped photos to capture the moment. Ethan stayed close to Laura, his arm draped over her shoulders as they walked together. He couldn't stop smiling, his face glowing with pride and happiness. For once, he didn't mind being the center of attention. People kept stopping them, parents, teachers, even strangers, to shake Laura's hand or thank her for her service. "You must be so proud of your son," one woman said, holding back tears. "And we're all proud of you too." Laura nodded politely, though she felt a little overwhelmed by the attention. She wasn't used to being celebrated like this. Her years in the Marine Corps had taught her to focus on duty rather than recognition. But today was different. Today she realized that her sacrifices hadn't gone unnoticed, not just by Ethan but by everyone around her. It was a humbling thought. Commander Jake Owens and the SEALs lingered nearby, drawing curious glances from Passage B. Some people approached them cautiously, unsure how to address such an intimidating yet respected group. Others simply stared in awe, whispering about the men who had turned a routine graduation into something unforgettable. When Jake noticed Laura standing with Ethan, he motioned for the team to follow him as he made his way toward them. "Corporal Bennett," Jake said warmly, offering a firm handshake. "Congratulations to both of you. Your son is impressive." Ethan grinned, shaking Jake's hand next. "Thank you, sir. I've heard a lot about you from my mom." Jake chuckled, glancing at Laura. "All good things, I hope." Laura smiled, faintly, still processing everything that had happened. "I don't know how to thank you," she admitted. "You didn't have to do any of this." Jake shrugged, brushing off her gratitude. "It's what we do. We take care of our own." The low simplicity of his words struck Laura deeply. In the military, there was a sense of family that went beyond bloodlines. It was built on trust, loyalty, and shared experiences. Laura had always known this, but today reminded her of its power. The SEALs weren't just colleagues or acquaintances. They were brothers in arms who showed up when it mattered most. As the crowd thinned, Jake turned to his team. "Let's give them some space," he said, nodding toward Laura and Ethan. The SEALs nodded in agreement, stepping back to let the mother and son share the moment privately. Before leaving, however, Jake leaned closer to Laura. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find us." His words carried weight, and Laura knew he meant every syllable. With a final salute, Jake and the SEALs disappeared into the crowd, their presence lingering long after they were gone. Ethan watched them leave, then turned to his mom. "That was incredible," he said, his voice full of admiration. "How do you even know those guys?" Laura hesitated, thinking back to her days serving alongside the SEALs. "We worked together on a mission years ago," she explained. "They're good people, the best." Ethan nodded, clearly impressed. "Well, I'm glad they came today. I mean, wow, just wow." Laura laughed softly, pulling him into another hug. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." For a while, they stood there, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, the laughter, the chatter, the occasional burst of applause. Laura soaked it all in, letting the joy of the day wash over her. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was enough, more than enough. Eventually, Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "Come on, Mom. Let's get some pictures before everyone leaves." They found a quiet corner near the entrance where a photographer was setting up equipment for family portraits. As they posed together, Ethan held his diploma tightly, beaming with pride. Laura wrapped an arm around him, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Each click of the camera captured not just their smiles, but the bond they shared, a bond strengthened by love, sacrifice, and resilience. When the photo session ended, Ethan suggested grabbing ice cream to celebrate. "My treat," he said, grinning mischievously. "You deserve it after everything." Laura raised an eyebrow, pretending to consider the offer. Ice cream does sound pretty tempting." Laughing, they headed toward the car, chatting about the ceremony and making plans for the rest of the evening. Along the way, Ethan paused to thank several teachers and friends who congratulated him. Laura hung back, watching him interact with others. He was confident, kind, and genuine, qualities she hoped she had instilled in him through her actions and example. As they drove to the local ice cream shop, Ethan glanced at Laura. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking, you should talk more about what you did in the Marines. People need to hear stories like yours." Laura frowned slightly, gripping the steering wheel. "Why? My job doesn't make me special, Ethan. I was just doing my part." "But that's exactly why it's important," Ethan insisted. "Not everyone understands what it means to serve. You've given up so much, for me, for this country, and people should know that." His words caught Laura off guard. She had never thought of herself as someone worthy of praise. To her, being a Marine was simply a role she played, a responsibility she embraced. But hearing Ethan speak with such conviction made her reconsider. Maybe sharing her story could inspire others, just as the SEALs had inspired her today. At the ice cream shop, they ordered their favorites, chocolate for Ethan and vanilla for Laura, and sat outside under the shade of a tree. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the town. They talked about the future, about Ethan's plans for college and Laura's hopes for her career. There was no pressure, no rush, just two people enjoying each other's company. Before heading home, Ethan looked at Laura seriously. "Promise me one thing, okay?" "What's that?" Laura asked, raising an eyebrow. "That you'll always remember how amazing you are," he said, "because I'll never forget it." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. "Deal," she whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. The ride home was quiet but comfortable, filled with reflections on the day's events. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Laura turned off the engine and looked at Ethan. "Today was unforgettable," she said softly. "Thank you for making it so special." Ethan smiled, unbuckling his seatbelt. "No, Mom. Thank you." They stepped out of the car, the cool evening air wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Inside the house, the glow of the sunset filtered through the windows, bathing the living room in soft light. Laura sank onto the couch, exhausted, but happy. Ethan joined her, resting his head on her shoulder. "I love you, Mom," he murmured, sleepily. "I love you too, Ethan," Laura replied, kissing the top of his head, "more than you'll ever know." As the night settled in, Laura allowed herself to relax completely. The day had been chaotic, emotional, and overwhelming, but it had also been beautiful. She thought about the guards who had tried to turn her away, the SEALs who had come to her rescue, and the countless people who had shown support. Most of all, she thought about Ethan and the incredible young man he had become. In that moment, Laura realized something important. Life's challenges may test us, but they also bring out the best in humanity. And sometimes, when we least expect it, kindness and respect shine through in ways that remind us why we keep fighting. For our families, for our communities, and for ourselves. The next morning, Laura woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. For a moment, she lay in bed, replaying the events of the previous day in her mind. It had been a whirlwind, emotions running high, unexpected twists, and moments that felt almost surreal. But one thing was certain. It had been unforgettable. Ethan was already awake when Laura stepped into the kitchen. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, a wide grin on his face. "Morning, Mom," he said cheerfully. "You're famous." Laura frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Ethan turned the phone toward her, showing her a post on social media. Someone had shared a photo of the SEALs standing behind her during the graduation ceremony. The caption read, "A true hero honored by heroes." Below it were hundreds of comments from people praising Laura's service and expressing admiration for the SEAL's gesture. Laura stared at the screen, stunned. She hadn't expected any of this. To her, the day had simply been about being there, for Ethan. But now it seemed others had taken notice. Strangers were sharing their stories of sacrifice, thanking her for representing all military families, and calling her an inspiration. "I don't know what to say," Laura admitted, shaking her head. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Ethan shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe not, but it did. And honestly, I think it's pretty cool." Laura couldn't argue with that. As much as she preferred staying out of the spotlight, she couldn't deny the impact the day had made, not just on her but on everyone who had witnessed it. People needed reminders of kindness, unity, and gratitude. If her story could inspire even one person, then maybe it was worth the attention. Later that afternoon, Laura decided to take a walk along the beach. The ocean always helped her clear her mind, and after the whirlwind of emotions from the past 2 days, she needed some time to reflect. The sand was soft beneath her feet, and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. As she walked, she thought about everything that had led her to this point: the sacrifices, the challenges, and the small victories that kept her going. Being a Marine wasn't easy, and neither was raising a child alone. But every step of the way she had done her best to stay strong, for herself and for Ethan. Now, seeing how proud he was of her, she realized that her efforts hadn't been in vain. Halfway down the beach, Laura spotted someone sitting on a bench overlooking the water. As she got closer, she recognized him. It was Commander Jake Owens. He must have noticed her too because he stood up and waved. "Corporal Bennett," he greeted her warmly. "I was hoping we'd run into each other." Laura smiled, surprised to see him. "Commander Owens, what brings you here?" Jake gestured toward the bench. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course not," Laura replied, taking a seat beside him. For a while they sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll in. Finally, Jake spoke. "How are you holding up? Yesterday was something else." Laura chuckled softly. "That's one way to put it. Honestly, I'm still processing everything. I didn't expect any of it." Jake nodded, understanding. "Sometimes, life throws us curveballs we don't see coming. But yesterday wasn't just about you. It was about reminding everyone of what really matters. Honor, respect, family. Those are the things that hold us together." His words resonated with Laura. She had spent so many years focusing on her duties that she sometimes forgot to pause and appreciate the bigger picture. Yesterday had been a reminder of why she chose this path in the first place. Not for recognition or glory, but to protect the values she believed in. "Thank you again," Laura said sincerely, "for everything. You didn't have to do any of that, but you did. It meant more to me than I can say." Jake shook his head, dismissing her gratitude. "Like I said before, it's what we do. We take care of our own. Besides, anyone who knows, you would have done the same." They talked for a while longer, sharing stories and laughing about old memories from their time serving together. By the time they parted ways, Laura felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. That evening, Laura and Ethan sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ethan leaned back in his chair, sipping a glass of lemonade. "So," he said casually, "what's next for you?" Laura raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, now that I'm graduating and heading off to college, what's your plan? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing? Or is it time for something new?" It was a question Laura hadn't fully considered. Her life had revolved around Ethan for so long that she hadn't given much thought to what came after. But hearing him ask made her realize that change wasn't something to fear. It was an opportunity. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. But whatever I decide, I want it to be meaningful, something that makes a difference. Ethan nodded approvingly. That sounds like you, Mom. Always thinking about others. Laura smiled, reaching over to ruffle his hair. Well, someone has to set a good example for you. They laughed, the sound mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Laura felt a deep sense of peace. Life wouldn't always be perfect, and challenges would undoubtedly come her way. But she knew she could face them, as long as she had love, support, and the strength to keep moving forward. When Ethan went inside to finish packing for college, Laura stayed on the porch, gazing at the horizon. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the highs and lows, the sacrifices and triumphs. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. And no matter what the future held, she knew she would continue to fight for her family, for her country, and for the values that defined her. In that quiet moment under the vast expanse of the night sky, Laura felt grateful. Grateful for Ethan, for the SEALs, and for everyone who had reminded her of the power of kindness and unity. Most of all, she was grateful for the chance to serve, not just as a Marine, but as a mother, a friend, and a human being trying to make the world a little brighter. And as she finally stood up to go inside, she whispered to herself, "We'll keep going. Together."